And obviously I'm glad that he turned up and that I didn't go on. But life is full of those, I think. And you look back and think, God, if I'd gone on that date, or if I made that call, or if I'd taken that job, or if I think there's a pleasure, a kind of bittersweet pleasure in contemplating that.
But then one day,
yeah,
must have been also another great change, because how many countries was it sold to? How many languages? Yes. How many copies? I mean, yeah. It's the kind of success that hardly ever happens.
Yeah, I mean, it was wonderful. I mean, I'm really conscious, because often, having done a lot of press for the new book in Britain, invariably the first question is, was it hard to live up to one day? And there's one response to that, which is yes, it's been agony and really hard, and that's why it's taken too long, and I don't want to disappoint anyone. And you sort of turn the previous success into this terrible, burden and this cross you have to bear. But I mean, why would you do that? You write to be read, and if a large number of people respond to a book and love it, that's great. I suppose the only thing I'm wary of is, a sort of horror, really, of disappointing people. I didn't want this book to be kind of One Day Two, a kind of dodgy sequel. I didn't want it to be a disappointment. At the same time, I'm kind of resigned to the fact that it probably won't sell 5 million copies. But I don't mind. I don't think I mind. I suspect I'll always be known as, the guy who wrote One Day. And my hope is that I'd be known as the guy who wrote One Day in Us, and maybe one other. But at the same time, I'd be really, there's a sort of cliche, isn't there? It's like a kind of rock star in his mansion sort of drinking himself into oblivion because he's had too much success. And you think, really, it's a great thing to happen. I'm really grateful. I'm so pleased that people read that book and loved it and that it was translated. And I hope that, that this book is as good and I hope I'm getting better, and it might not have the same commercial success, but I'm proud of it, and I think it's a step forward. And as long as I can keep doing that, I'm happy. I'm very lucky to have the security that One Day gave me, and I'm lucky to have been able to take my time to get this next book right.
I was really more curious about the fact, since you write about this, and I keep trying to ask you about how you sort of perceive yourself, and going from being, as you've described yourself, as a bad actor, an unsuccessful actor, gradually becoming a okay scriptwriter, and then becoming this enormously successful writer. What happened in your head? What happened to you? As far as do you feel you're the same? How did you manage?
I don't think anything's changed, and I hope not. I don't think so. I mean, if Hannah, my partner, was here, she might say, "Oh, he's a monster." But I don't think so. I mean, the job is the same. I approach writing a book exactly the same as I did when I sat down to write the first one. I want it to be as good as it can be. I'm ambitious for it, and I'm aware that I'm very lucky to be writing for a living, and I work hard, and I'm not cynical about it. I'm kind of passionate about it and diligent. That hasn't changed. Like I said, I am materially nothing particularly has changed. It's just I have security now, and that's a wonderful thing. That's not something I want to undersell. But I don't think it's made a difference. I'm still an absolute nervous wreck about it, I have to say. I mean, people say, well, it must have been very hard to follow such a great success. It would have been it's even harder to follow up a failure. I mean, because I loved One Day, and I was very proud of it, and I thought, this is probably the best book I'm ever going to write. If it flopped, then that's a much harder thing to follow. And that would have been tough. I don't know if I would have been able to, if it had disappeared completely, I don't know if I would have been able to write another book, because I was very proud of that last, well, I must stop calling it that last book. I'm very proud of One Day. So I'm still fearful, and I find the business of publishing, of actually putting something out there, whether it's a book or a movie, absolutely terrifying. Because it's so exposing, and even when you're not writing autobiographically, you have to write personally. You have to write about the things you care about and the things that preoccupy you. And you have to be judged. Judged commercially and critically, and you know, if people don't like something, they will absolutely tell you. And even if you don't read reviews, you know, you can't hide from that stuff. And I'm very thin-skinned. I find it very nerve-wracking, but at the same time recognize how lucky I am and what a privileged position that is to be in. And to be able to write, to be able to do that thing that when I was 23 and 24, I loved, but I couldn't see a way into it.
No, but I kept asking this because I sort of see in your characters that they sort of look upon themselves the way Douglas does, the way he is stuck in his image of himself. So I guess your answer is that you've always been you, no matter what you've been doing. Yes.
I think it's probably not healthy to be too aware of how one is perceived as well. I mean, I run away from all of that, really. I don't read anything, I don't do Google searches, I don't look on Amazon or anything, and I'm trying not to think too much about, particularly about that literary popular thing, because it's a bit like trying to describe your own face. It's not really, you're not really the person to do it. You should, I think, steer clear of all of that. So, as to, I'm aware I'm still probably not answering your question, but I'm trying.
No, but you are. You did.
Okay.
I believe you.
Okay. I mean, I think I just try and get on with it and not think too much about. Certainly not about, you know, kind of critical response or popular versus literary or any of those things. I tend to kind of, you know, cover my eyes and my fingers in my ears, if you can do that at the same time. Just test it to see if you can. Yes, you can.
But I believe that's also really the quality of your work. It is the fact that you are popular and you are deeply serious as well, and it's a very nice combination. That's what I felt anyway. Yes, and a lot of people. I'm really not the only one.
Thank you.
Yes, but finally, I mean, since love is also the theme.
Yeah.
Yes, and I was asking myself whether, because we don't want to spoil too much here, but you have written 4 books, so we can say something without. And it's not necessarily the happy ending that's your thing, and that's, I mean, if you would consider these to be sort of rom-coms in a book, that they would require the happy ending. But
I think they're all. I mean, again, we have to tiptoe carefully. I think they're all. I think they're all happy. They're all happy and they're all sad. It's true. What I've never been able to. This isn't a spoiler. What I've never been able to do is a kind of joyous ending. And I get very envious when I go to movies. I see a lot of movies, particularly a lot of successful British movies, have a kind of joy and a kind of uplift and a kind of elation at the end. They come out wiping tears away and, you know, really swept away. And I've never been able to pull that off. Real joy. And I'd love to try and do that one day. And rather than something where you think, oh, it's sort of happy, it's sort of sad, you know. But at the same time, I like that quality. The word that I try not to think about too much is bittersweet. You know,
Yes.
All the books, I think, they're not cynical, but they have moments of real pain, and they're romantic, but they're also full of, you know, awkwardness and distress as well. And this book, I think, is probably the sort of funniest. I think it's the funniest thing, and also the saddest book, but sad in a different way from One Day, not in a kind of, in a maybe a quieter way than One Day. I like that. I like. I hope for a big response from readers in terms of laughing out loud, and being moved. I mean, I think that's. I don't always want to strain for that in a book. I don't want to write books that feel manipulative, but I do hope that people are affected by the books. And next time round, it might just be a silly comedy, or next time round, I might try and play it completely straight cut all the jokes. But
you love the jokes, right?
I do, though I think it's a bit, I think it comes slightly from insecurity, in that when I started writing, I was writing, apart from Simpatico, my own work was all sitcom, it was comedy, it was all gags, 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 and it was only through adapting other writers' work, like Thomas Hardy's Test of the D'Urbervilles, which, you know, is a wonderful book, but not a very funny book. I don't know how many people know it, but it's you know, it's quite a tough book. And adapting that, and adapting a wonderful book by Blake Morrison called When Did You Last See Your Father, which is about grief. I'm working on a TV show called Cold Feet, which was a mixture of comedy and serious scenes. It was only when I was made to write seriously that I began to write seriously. In other words, left to my own devices, I think I'd have just, rather like someone trying too hard at a dinner party, I'd have just kept making jokes. But because someone said, no, I'm sorry, you've got to write death, you've got to write grief, you've got to write alcoholism, you've got to write these other things, I've sort of grown more confident about darker material.